Hello, welcome back to Math Time with Professor Prime, and I am your host as always, Professor Prime. So let's talk about math and stealth games. So when it comes to stealth games, right, like they've been around for a minute, and they are a big part of like video game history. And we have a lot of different like stealth games out there or gaming series, right? But also a lot of games that if they're not explicitly stealth games, they absolutely have stealth features, right? And no matter how you cut it, though, it's like I don't see stealth games going anywhere. But even if they were going anywhere, would I know? I'm sorry, that was a bad joke about stealth. It did not stick the landing unless you're laughing, in which case it was stealthy in a different way. Um, it's so bad. Um, but I digress. Stealth games are not going anywhere anytime soon. Um, and with Metal Gear, right? It is not only one of my favorite series, and with Metal Gear Solid being one of my favorite games, but it is pivotal to the tail of stealth games, right? Like it's impacted a lot of different games out there. And so we're gonna talk about different staples of stealth games, what they usually entail, and we'll go from there. We'll talk about the math along the way. I've talked about Metal Gear a lot, so I've talked about stealth in these videos before, but I have not given them its own like long form video. I think I have made a short form video and stuff in gaming, but yeah, so I haven't given a long form video. So here we are. I don't plan to get into any like major like plot points of like anything, so you should be safe. You're always free to assume spoilers, but you should be good here. With that in mind, let's get into stealth games. So when I think about stealth games, I can't help but think about Metal Gear slash Metal Gear Solid, but I also think about some of the games that I got experienced along the way because like my enjoyment of Metal Gear absolutely led me to explore some other titles. Like I think about Tenchu. Like anyone remember that franchise? It was good. Um, I also think about Splinter Cell. I think about Siphon Filter. God, it's been a minute since I thought about that. But as time has evolved, I also think about like games like the Arkham series, right? Like things like that, where it's that blend of action and stealth. It reminds me about like Metal Gear, but from a different perspective, if that makes sense. It's got like it has some similarities while being its own thing, right? But it blends action and stealth together in a good way. Side note, before I go on to some of the things that I wanted to say about stealth games, speaking of Arkham Asylum, like in that whole Arkham series and Metal Gear, I once had this dream where Snake was entering the Batcave to like stop some new form of like Metal Gear, presumably bat related, and there was a fight between Batman and Solid Snake, and I have no idea how that ended because I woke up and I never had that dream again. But I would like to see that fight because like who would win? Um, but I digress. I digressed hard actually. It is late and I'm tired and I'm excited, but we're gonna keep on going. Okay, so when it comes to stealth games, right? Like there are some staples that pop up over the years. So one of the big parts about stealth games is like you have the idea that stealth is a major feature or the goal, right? So you have this idea that you're playing as a character or characters, and you're moving around in this given world, right? And for each map that you're on, you're staking it out. You're using the environment to against your opponent sometimes, but it could also be used against you. You're trying to move at different speeds, and I'll get into that in a little bit. But you're also trying to avoid making certain sounds or make a sound too loudly. Um, and the objectives may vary, but the whole idea is like you're monitoring your opponents and your environments, and you're monitoring your movements and your speed and the sounds that you're making, and if you're visible, right? um, there's math across the board with everything I just said, right? Because right there's math in the motions that you're taking and the speed of those motions and the timing that you're employing when you're exploring that map math and the environments that you're navigating and where the enemies are in that environment. And there's math in the sounds that you're making and trying to avoid making in some sense, and math and light and lighting used in that area and how you can use that, right? And then in a lot of these games, um, you know, action and stealth is not uncommon, and I'm gonna attribute a lot of that to Metal Gear. And so for a lot of these games, you have weapons, and like your weapons make noises. You have certain ammo caps, and you have to consider all of that. And how you want to like approach a situation. There are some games where like stealth is not only a big mechanic, but it is the point, right? And so you might get a game over if you're detected. But there are a lot of games where you can either be stealthy or you can, go in guns blazing, and it can be action heavy. But there are some games that do allow that, like Metal Gear, but you might get punished for going the action heavy route, right? Um, and sometimes, like even if you're careful, it can be like hard to avoid. So you have these games where, like again, like stealth is a mechanic or it's the objective, and you are getting a good idea of your environment as you're exploring, and you're paying attention to the fact that you can use that environment against your opponents, or it can be used against you, and you're trying to navigate, whatever map you're on for whatever purpose you're in it for. And you might have weapons, and no matter how you cut it, there's math in that stealth, math in those weapons, and what you want to do, and the damage that you could cause, and what that could do against you. And again, Metal Gear is such a big part of that stealth genre, right? Like with Metal Gear, right? You get rewarded for that stealth, and sometimes you get punished for that action part. But it does give you the option a lot of the times, and you got to decide what you want to do or how you're going to blend it. And there are some situations that are tricky, like where it's like you might have to do some action or have to do some stealth or have to like switch from one mode to the other, or in the process like use some hybrid. And that's interesting to me because, like, say you're going, and for the record, like, this is starting to turn into a Metal Gear video, or it will soon, and so it's kind of stealthy in that way. This is low key a Metal Gear video, or it has Metal Gear elements. It was stealthy until I said it, um, or just stealth. Because the point was to get into that at some point. But I don't know, it's late. Um, but with Metal Gear, what I like about it is like some of the things that I was mentioning, right? Like they work really well for that because like they establish so many of the tropes and mechanics that you see in a lot of games. Metal Gear does so many things well. It kind of like got the formula right the first time, and then like that second game, it kind of upped it. But I want to be clear about some things because like back in like '87, year I was born, we had that first Metal Gear, right? And they establish so many things that work well for the series. You have that idea that you have these maps that you're exploring. You have the narrative motivation, and as you're exploring those maps, you have your enemies, right? You have different enemies in different positions, and you're trying to navigate that map without alerting them, or if you alert them, then you're trying to take them down. And you just have that basic idea, and like you could distract the guards or like knock on walls, stuff like that, or like punch them out. um Sorry, you could use different items to distract them. So it's like, yeah. Sorry, my train of thought. There's so many things that you can do in that first Metal Gear that work and work well. And then there's like Metal Gear 2, which isn't the second Metal Gear game. It's the second canon Metal Gear game, but it's not the second. It's just like there was a port of Metal Gear for Nintendo after that original like MSX2 version, but then there was a sequel like Metal Gear 2 Snake's Revenge for you know also Nintendo, and that was like non-canon. But we got Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake after that, and that like took so many things that you know Metal Gear did right, because it kind of set the pace, right? It's like, hey, this is what the stealth game is. It's like you're taking stock of the environment, you're scoping out your opponents, you're taking them down or avoiding them, but you're tracking their movements, you're keeping track of yours, you're moving at certain speeds, adjusting as you go. You're doing all these cool stuff, and then like with Metal Gear 2 Solid Snake, they up the ante, right? Like they added more things that you could do. And then, we eventually got to Metal Gear Solid. And so Metal Gear 2 already made an impression, right? But Metal Gear Solid just skyrocketed everything, right? Um, it is a game that is dripping with atmosphere. Everything is just like so like tightly contained in the best way. So you start off the game, you're sneaking around, you eventually get your first weapon, and you get different things like the box um, that you could use to hide. And you're exploring like Shadow Moses, um, just keeping track of everything, right? Like, and you have the idea of what you were doing in those 2D Metal Gear games taken to the 3D environment. And of course, you have your radar, and in this case, the Soliton radar, and you have like different, sorry, you have different like layouts for each area that you're in, and you can see like the enemies on there and their field of vision, and you can use that to your advantage. And over the years you have the idea of like the alert system in Metal Gear like ever growing, and like each like major entry into Metal Gear added something interesting to the mechanic. It's a crazy thing to me because it's like, hey, they came out with a certain formula for Metal Gear right out the gate, and they were able to expand that, right? They were able to add to it periodically, right? And I think like all of them did that. But Metal Gear Solid 3 was particularly crazy because there was like no shortage of things that you could do in that game, right? You can play it all the way stealthy if you wanted, or you can play it very action oriented. You can play around with the guards. You could, uh, you know, blow up like the ammo houses and blow up the food houses, and you have like these hungry guards in different areas that have low ammo, and maybe they see you, and maybe because they're hungry they hallucinate, or maybe they see you and they fire, but they don't really have that much ammo and they miss, and there's not much they can do. But the idea is that you're taking that stealth angle and you're adding new parts to it. And Metal Gear Solid 3 did some crazy things with it. Like you can really experiment. But yeah, so there's so many different games, right, that work well for the stealth genre, and then you have stealth elements that pop up in different games over time. And there's some games which they feature stealth elements, but they are absolutely not equipped to handle them and handle them well. It usually be like clunky or like unforgiving. Typically both. Um, at any rate, so you have Metal Gear, and I think like that's really cool because it did some wonderful things for the stealth genre and action games in general, and just games in general. Because you have like Hideo Kojima, he came along, him and his teams over the years, and they created like a beast, like a juggernaut that's still making impact. You can't really erase that kind of thing. Um, and then I was thinking about like the Batman thing earlier because like you have that idea of like, hey, you have that action and you have the stealth. You have all of Batman's different tools, and the ability to like hang from different things, and you get to play around with that. Because you could be hanging from the ceiling, or like a statue, or like you can be hiding in a grate, and you can take advantage of that in the environments they're within. But the whole big thing with stealth is that is very motion oriented, is very much about control and precision in a lot of cases. And in the cases where your cover is blown, if you have a game that allows it, you can adapt. And for me, that's key because, like, in so many games like that I've seen that to me don't really do this stealth thing well, they'll make it be like, oh yeah, you're cool, and that's it, and it's done, and then you can't adjust. Even if some of those games that feature elements like that, um, they might have like a game that's action oriented, and it's like, well, that just doesn't fit to me. But that's a whole nother thing. My big thing is just like, yeah, you can't really get around math and stealth. And it's funny because like, math is pretty stealthy. There's a lot of on the surface stuff, but there's a lot of behind the scenes stuff too, right? And when gaming, again, it's the kind of thing that's pretty visceral because like as you're playing these games, right? Like stealth games, it's like you have your health, you have different resources, different items and weapons that you're using, and there's math and all of those things in the resource management. But you also have the idea that you're trying to take down opponents or trying to avoid them. But no matter what you're doing, you're playing around with motion, you're playing around with the speed of said motion, you're playing around with the environment and taking advantage of that double-edged sword because it could easily take you out, but you can use it to your advantage if you're careful. And I really like that idea. And a self game done right, like Metal Gear games, that feels good because you can adjust your strategy, right? Like you can adapt. You can also like keep track of like when that alert status is, because like you have like alert, evasion, and caution, in later Metal Gear titles, and so you can play around with that and try to adapt. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I immediately wanted to say. Just yeah, cell games. There's some that work, some that don't, and some games that like feature them that can work, and some that don't. Because it's a wild thing. We live in an age where like genre is increasingly meaningless. Like, right, because you have like a lot of action adventure games. I feel where it's like, hey, you're gonna get some RPG elements, and you're probably gonna get some stealth elements. Some games implement those things better than others. Um, and while we're here, it makes me think of Horizon because Horizon is an action RPG. Though I don't think everyone agrees on that because some people are like, oh, it's action adventure. It's like, I mean, action adventure RPG. Like to me, you can't get around that. But there's stealth elements in there too, because you don't have to just go in with your weapons like the stuff or the bows, the arrows, all the other weapons. You don't have to go in doing all that right at the bat. There's stealth kills built in. Um, so it's like you have options, and it's like it's interesting because I feel like with Horizon, you have to get into a rhythm with the stealth there. But yeah, oh my god, I am tired. I think I'm done. But yeah, so that is what I had to say for my like longer form stealth video. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you haven't played some Metal Gear, you should go play some Metal Gear. Like, and seriously speaking, though, like for any Metal Gear is good, but Metal Gear Solid, like, oh my god, you should play it if you haven't. And if you have, you should replay it. Just saying. I'll see you in the future.